Okay, so we have our Thursday Q&A session, and we're here with Gangalila Vidas, who has a topic for today. Please share.
I don't know if it's a topic, but I started exactly a year ago with Srimad Bhagavatam was gifted to me, and so I read every day a little bit, and I'm at Canto 6, chapter 6, and it's a repeating thing, and I wonder how it's kind of off throwing for me is that when it comes to there's a bazillion names of somebody who was in the womb of somebody who had 100 sons, and then they those have
Sounds like Srimad
those
Bhagavatam.
women had also 100, they got the 100 sons in their womb, and then an endless list of names. And how can I make that a little bit more bite-sized? Because that's quite overwhelming. And like, how important is it? Because sometimes I go like, like this morning, I was like, it was really bothering me. I'm like, okay, next page again. Oh gosh, and more long Sanskrit names. And I was like, and the next text was like just names. And I was like, I can't read them. And then I'm like, okay, you're supposed to read it. So I made myself read them. And then a few texts down, there was something I'm almost recognizing. It was like, and they were like Ketu or Rahu, or Dosha or something. What I've names I can recognize. But yeah, my question is like, how, it's overwhelming. How to deal with that, and what it's so disproportionate. Is that how I should take it? Like it's supposed to throw me off and be disproportionate, so I don't forget those are just not just regular human beings.
Hmm. Well, I mean, it's a um little difficult for me to answer because you know, you know, what can I say? Our gurus, they have their own methods of instruction, right? And we see that Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, he emphasized Srimad Bhagavatam very much, right? And that's something that to this day is um is to this day, very widely studied and emphasized within the ISKCON society, right? Um, and that's for his own purpose, and he has his own style of instructing and teaching his disciples, right? And Srimad Bhagavatam, of course, it is an extremely important scripture for us. It is has a particular um, dignity of being, you know, one of the most ancient Vedic texts. And it is, it's technically classed as a Purana. And generally the Purana, there are many different types of Vedic texts. And generally the Puranas, they are telling, literally Purana means something like old, and it's telling very ancient histories and stories and events that happened even in previous creations. But Srimad Bhagavatam it stands out amongst the Puranas because it's not only telling many histories and stories, but it's also giving a lot of philosophy, very deep, profound philosophy and poetry. So it has a profundity and a depth to it that you don't generally find in the Puranas. Um, so and Srimad Bhagavatam is our best friend because it's supporting. You can say it's like our evidence, for Mahaprabhu's conception. What Mahaprabhu is presenting and what Srimad Bhagavatam is presenting is synonymous. Um, so it's a helpful reference for us. Yes, this is corroborated in the ancient text, Srimad Bhagavatam. However, it can be a little difficult to navigate because is a text that is dealing with principles of pure devotion, but it's also taking a bit of a wider, it has a bit of a wider reach. And one way Srila Sridhar Maharaj has explained Srimad Bhagavatam is that it's, in some places it's giving stories and histories that are perhaps not directly in pertaining to pure devotion, but supporting that, right? They're like kind of like building blocks that are supporting that. So some matters may be a little peripheral, but they're supporting that central principle of pure devotion. By contrast, if you look at Chaitanya Charitamrita is 100% through and through, just dealing with that essential substance of Krishna prema, right? That highest gift of Krishna prema. So for that reason, Srimad Bhagavatam can be a little difficult to navigate, little tricky to navigate, in distinguishing between what's more, as you're expressing, what's ascertaining what's more essential and what's less essential, right? And what is it important to give your full attention to and study with full attention, and what perhaps is less essential, dealing with some more somewhat peripheral topics. And I would say for that reason, we saw that in the case of our own Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, he did not emphasize Srimad Bhagavatam so much. It is something that in our mat, they would study that text in the afternoon. In the morning, there were 3 classes a day, right? And I'm sure it's still going on now. In the morning, there would be Chaitanya Bhagavat, and there would be a 4 p.m. Srimad Bhagavatam class. And then in the evening / night would be Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, in our mat, they did study and read that every day. But besides that, we saw that generally our Gurudev did not emphasize so much. And my impression was that he cautioned us in studying Srimad Bhagavatam. He emphasized more, of course, the texts of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, Brahma Samhita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavad Gita, Prapana Jivanamrita, like that. And, I know of a few cases where devotees asked our Gurudev for permission to read, and he didn't give them permission. And one devotee told me that he asked our Gurudev multiple times for permission. Our Gurudev didn't give. And then he said finally, it was like on the 3rd or 4th time that then he reframed the question, and he said, "Can I read Srimad Bhagavatam with the purports of Srila Prabhupada?" And like he said it, he specifically phrased it like that. And then Gurudev said, "Yes, you can do that." He gave permission for that. Like under the, Mahaprabhu himself, there's a famous line in Chaitanya Charitamrita where he's, or perhaps it's Rup Damodar, I don't remember. But Jaha Bhagavata Pada Vaishnavera Stane, there's this instruction given, go and study Bhagavatam under the guidance of a Vaishnava. It's a phrase which is quoted many times by our by our gurus. So there is some caution. And another thing I heard from our Gurudev, and this is how I've harmonized it more recently, is there was also one time when he said, we have some right to read Srimad Bhagavatam. And he said, especially, I don't remember the exact way he phrased it, but he mentioned some particular sections that were focused on the teachings of pure devotion. And he mentioned the section on Prahlad Maharaj, and so that's why we're studying this now. The section on Prahlad Maharaj, he said that is very good for us to read. Also, he mentioned the section on Dhruva Maharaj. That is also very helpful for us to read. And then also he mentioned, oh, what are they called again? The Nava-yogendras. Nava-yogendras, that's in the, I think, 11th canto, perhaps. There's these 9 rishis, king rishis or yogi rishis or something. There are many important verses and teachings in that section, which are exclusively dealing with the teachings of pure devotion. So that's been my personal adjustment, and that's how we are. That's why we decided to, with Suvasini Jiri, we decided that's what we'll do, we'll read certain parts of Srimad Bhagavatam, because otherwise, as you're experiencing, I think it can be a bit of a labyrinth. Another thing that comes to mind is our Gurudev also made a comment, like the first 2 cantos, like we can read the first 2 cantos. Those are very good for us. And also, I believe Srila Prabhupada himself says, if you're not liberated, don't go past the 2nd canto. I've heard some comment that Prabhupada himself made, and I've heard some devotees tell me like they read that and then they just stopped, like, okay, I'm not liberated, so I'll just stop. So yeah, I mean, not that I'm saying there's a right or wrong answer about whether we should read Bhagavatam. If we're reading very carefully, under the guidance of a Vaishnava, then of course everything is positive. But I can say, there is some caution. Personally, I've never felt necessity to read Srimad Bhagavatam, and that's because I feel that in the talks that we have from our gurus, particularly, Srila Govinda Maharaj and Srila Sridhar Maharaj, I feel they've distilled the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. Like there are many beautiful verses in Bhagavatam which I, are very dear to my heart, but I've never read it. But, just from hearing the talks and reading the books of our gurus, I feel that, everything I could have got from Bhagavatam, I'm getting in that way. And yeah, now for the first time, in the company of you all, I've started to kind of read more seriously, going through the section on Prahlad. One day I would like to read it all, when that day comes. And in your own case, I would say, if you are feeling a bit bewildered, then it's okay. You don't have to read it. And perhaps just try what I mentioned, our Gurudev suggested, just reading those particular sections. If you'd like, I can write out as well, exactly what those sections were that he mentioned. Yeah, I think those are my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Vishaka. Yes, and I am coming to your class, and it's helpful to have somebody walk us through. Yes, and please share maybe in the WhatsApp about the chapters which are
I can do that. Yeah,
suggested.
I'll write
Thank
that
you.
out. Yeah. The first 2 cantos Gurudev has mentioned are very good, and I believe Prabhupada too, for everyone, and then Prahlad, Dhruva. I can write that down. Yeah. And welcome, we had a few more devotees join us. Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu and Ramananda Prabhu, Pawan. Welcome. Dandavad.
Can I say something?
Sure, yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, because our sampradaya is more or less hearing, Ravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam. Not so much reading. Guruma told actually, I seen also many devotees they read and then they become sadhya because they cannot accommodate those things. That's why Gurudev said also read under the guidance or with the Vaishnavas. Yeah. I never read. I don't feel like reading, but I read Gurumaya books. I think I get everything.
Mm.
Yeah, that's my 2 cents. Also, Gurudev said, Srila Guru Maharaj had throwing power. The real Vaishnavas, they have throwing power. So we can receive it, then they receive everything.
Yeah, I
These are
mean
my thoughts.
that is a nice point, Prabhu. You know, definitely I would say our gurus have emphasized reading and association. You know, it is more beneficial for us. Um, and in fact, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he it was more or less a rule in his mat, you know, that he didn't allow, he was very strict. He didn't allow devotees to read in their own time. Like he was very strict about that, you know, just during the classes, you know. But then, you know, they did have 3 classes a day, you know, so there was plenty of opportunity for that, you know, and in our current, you know, in the lifestyle that most of our devotees have, you know, and then, you know, I would say it is to be encouraged to take some time to read, you know, some of our books. But just to make the point, you know, that yes, reading in association, that is definitely superior, and you know, as much as possible to study and read in that way, you know. In sadhu sangha, you know, there's so much more revelation that can come, and particularly, you know, when we are adjusting ourselves, you know, to be in a mood of service, right, that we are reading and studying in a mood of service, you know, that why are we doing this? Because we want to offer ourselves to our sweet Lord, you know, that is what we want, you know. So everything is for him. Srila Sridhar Maharaj says in one place, the result of our hearing will also be for him. You know, we'll try to adjust ourselves, our consciousness in that way. That even the result of what we are hearing, that is also for him. So anyhow, glad that you brought that topic up, Gangalila. Would anyone else like to bring up a topic or question for our meeting today?
Something about Rathayatra.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Rathayatra. Should say something about Rathayatra. Yeah, we're in this 3-day festival period, right? Yesterday was Gundicha Marjan, the cleaning of the Lord's temples and cleaning of our own heart, right? Which is also to be a temple of the Lord ultimately. And then the day before was the disappearance day of Srila Gadadhar Pandit and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, another very important day. And then today is Rathayatra, right? So yesterday, Mahaprabhu led his devotees in preparing for the Lord's arrival at Gundicha. And today they are receiving the Lord. And I still haven't tuned into the live stream, but they must be in the middle of taking Lord Jagannath from his temple to the Gundicha temple. And it is a very happy festival, right? Because for many reasons. Because, this point, right, that Krishna left Vrindavan, this is something of supreme significance, right? That Krishna, he grew up in Vrindavan. He had a multitude of loving relationships of different types with the residents of Vrindavan. And then suddenly he has to leave, right? And that is the most tragic occurrence in all time and space, that Krishna left Vrindavan. It is the greatest tragedy and the greatest heartbreak. You know, there's one expression of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur where he says, our life's goal is to offer service to the residents of Vrindavan who are suffering in separation since Krishna left. Right? So it is a very, very deep point of our theology, you could say, or reality, that Krishna left Vrindavan, you know, and it is, you know, in that mood of separation from Krishna, leaving Vrindavan, we find the deepest expressions of devotion coming from the hearts of the devotees. Right? And the highest of that is the expression which is recorded in Chaitanya Charitamrita, right? When Mahaprabhu is traveling on his way to Puri, right, and he's remembering the pastime of Madhavendra Puri, right, and it is in the heart of Madhavendra Puri that this expression of Srimati Radharani comes, right? Ayi dina dayarjanata he, Ayi dina dayarjanata he. Oh, I've forgotten it now. Maturanata Kadavaluksha Hridayam. I've forgotten it now, but very deep expression of heartbreak and separation coming from Radharani, that, you know, Krishna has left us, you know, Krishna has abandoned us. Now he's gone to Mathura. He's forgotten his real identity, right, as the Lord of Vrindavan. Now he is the Lord of Mathura. And, you know, this came in the heart of Madhavendra Puri, right, what was originally the expression of Srimati Radharani. And so we find this sentiment echoed in all of the hearts of the Rupanuga Vaishnavas, you could say. Right? And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you know, he also expressed very extraordinary thing, that he said that in his last days he wanted to stay in Kurukshetra because, you know, his vision was that at Kurukshetra there's the greatest need of service, right? Because Kurukshetra is when this feeling of separation in the hearts of the Brajabasis, it reaches its zenith point, right? Because, you know, Krishna meets with all of the Brajabasis after it's been like 100 years of separation, and they're meeting for the first time. And one would think that there would be some alleviation, right, in that pain, but in fact, it is just the opposite. It intensifies so many times, because there's this stark contrast, right, between how they remember Krishna, what their relationship was with Krishna before, what the atmosphere was, you know, his dress, his manner, everything, and then what they're seeing in front of them now, right? This is Krishna as a royal, you know, royal princely figure, you know, and living in wealth and surrounded by so many opulent queens, and there's a whole entourage, right? Soldiers, elephants, trumpets, and all these things, right? And so there, and of course, in that position, he's very remote, you know, he's a public figure, right? He's not their intimate, beloved cowherd boy friend, right? In the forests of Braja. And so they're coming to meet Krishna in anticipation of, you know, experiencing a type of sweet reunion, but in fact, it's just the opposite. And so their pain of separation actually intensifies so many times. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he expressed this feeling that, oh, I would like to spend my last days in Kurukshetra, because his feeling was that service is valuable according to necessity. And so in Kurukshetra, the necessity, particularly in the hearts of Radharani and the Braja Gopis, it has reached its highest point, and they are in need of the greatest support. And so Bhakti Vinod's thinking is, if I can render a little service there for them, then the value of that will be amplified so much. So he made this expression, oh, what will I do with Vrindavan? He said, Vrindavan is for the hollow thinkers. He made this very extreme statement. Vrindavan is for the hollow thinkers, but Kurukshetra is the real place of bhajan.
Oh, shallow thinkers.
Sorry, what did you say, Prabhu?
Shallow thinkers.
Yeah, sometimes it's said shallow, but actually the original Bengali word, it means more something like hollow, like a hollow tree. But in English, shallow sounds more smooth. Um, so this is this moment, right, of separation is very has important place in the hearts of the Rupanuga Vaishnavas, and so for this reason, the Rathayatra is a very joyful occasion, because what is it symbolizing? Rathayatra is symbolizing bringing Krishna back to Vrindavan, right? Because the Jagannath temple is representing Dwarka on one level, Krishna living in the opulence, wealth, Aishwarya of Dwarka. And then he's leaving there and going to Gundicha, which is representing Vrindavan, right? That simple, sweet lifestyle with the Brajabasis in Vrindavan. And so it is a very, very happy occasion, right? And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is, there's beautiful description, right, of all of these different moods, and Mahaprabhu is chanting many different verses expressing different moods of devotion, and he's also referencing this feeling of heartbreak in Srimati Radharani, and seem, because so then also in Jagannath Puri there's also this association with Kurukshetra also, right, and so Mahaprabhu is also expressing some of these sentiments of Radharani, that, oh, I'm meeting this Krishna again, but it is not the same Krishna, right? I would like to bring him back to Vrindavan. I want to bring him back to Vrindavan. And so it is such a joyful occasion. And then for this reason, we can also mention, this is the reason why Srila Sridhar Maharaj mentioned that Rathayatra cannot be done in Vrindavan, right? Cannot be done in Vrindavan or also Navadvip, which is considered non-different from Vrindavan, right? Because, it does go on, unfortunately, but Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he made the point, that, the whole point of Rathayatra is bringing Krishna back to Vrindavan. So, from Vrindavan, where are you taking him? But it's, ontologically, it doesn't add up. So he made this expression, you can do this anywhere in the world, but you cannot do it in Vrindavan or in Navadvip. That will pain the hearts of the Brajabasis, if they see that, right? Just like when the Braja Gopis, the Brajabasis, when, because it was a Krura, right? He was the uncle of Lord Krishna in the Mathura connection, right? Akrura, Uncle Akrura. He was the one he came with a chariot to pick Krishna up, right? To take him from Vrindavan to Mathura. And so Srila Sridhar Maharaj mentioned, like, if the Braja Gopis see this chariot, then what will they think? They will think, oh, someone's coming to take our Krishna away, right? It will. So, this is another thing to consider, right? That many things that may not feel relevant to us, they are deeply meaningful to Vaishnavas of a higher order. That they are very sensitive to many points which may seem meaningless to us. So this is, why we have to move with some caution, right? We're always trying to be in the posture of hearing, right? We are attentively trying to hear, what is the mood of our gurus and honoring that, and I feel that, a lot of our practice is actually about honoring the feelings of the higher Vaishnavas, right? So many things that we do, if not everything that we do in our devotional practice, doesn't mean, may not mean that much to us, but we're honoring what is meaningful to our gurus, right? And simply in that honoring, we are inviting grace, right? So in everything that we do, we're worshiping the deity, and we're not able to talk with the deity. We don't, we cannot have a direct exchange with the deity. We have some appreciation for their beautiful form, and maybe in some rare occasion we may feel some more profound type of exchange. But we cannot have this type of deep feeling and connection. We don't have that at this stage. But our gurus have that, right? We're honoring that. Our gurus have asked us, worship the deity. They've asked us to chant our japa, that we may not do that with so much feeling most of the time, but it has some meaning for them, and we're honoring that. Following Ekadashi, may not have so much meaning to us, but we know it means something to our gurus. Their hearts are awakened. Their hearts are awakened in a more subtle plane of reality. And we're honoring that. We are currently in a more dense condition, right? We are in a more gross platform of existence. The layers of conditioning are very thick, right? And so that subtle plane is, like in Bhagavad Gita, Yani Sha Sarvabhutanam Tasyam Jagarti Samyami, right? It is like night to us. We are awake in this world of the senses, and that subtle world of spirit is like night to us. But for the enlightened soul, it is just the opposite. They are awake in that plane, that higher, more subtle plane, and they are asleep to this dark world of the senses. So, a lot of our spiritual practice is about honoring that. And there's one line of Srila Gurudev, it's in Revealed Truth, where Gurudev, he says something like, 90% of the Vedas are just trying to establish a mood of respect, right? Because that's a starting point, that we just have some respect, because we don't feel it. When we feel it, we'll be in love. When we feel it, we'll be madly in love, and we won't be able to do anything else, Like we hear the Braja Gopis, they're lamenting because they're too Krishna conscious, like to the point where it's a problem. So when that natural awakening and feeling arises within us, we don't need to be told to do anything. But before that, we're moving respectfully, because we know something's there. We can't see it right now. We cannot see it right now. because we don't have the eyes to see it. But we know from our teachers, we can also use some of our own logic and intelligence to understand there's something there. So we're moving carefully, we're treading lightly, and trying to develop some feeling of sensitivity to what is the mood of our gurus. Right? Madhavendra Purira Sambandha Dada Jani. There's this line in Chaitanya Charitamrita when Mahaprabhu, he meets with this one Brahmin, and they can recognize one another. This is in Mathura. They happen to cross paths in Mathura, Mahaprabhu and this one Brahmin. We don't hear his name, he's just referred to as the Sanudian Brahmin. And but they recognize one another. And that Brahmin, he makes the statement to Mahaprabhu, I know you must have some connection with Madhavendra Puri. I can recognize in your movements. So, anyhow, we're trying to move with this type of awareness and grace and respect for what has meaning to our gurus. Right? And simply by that mood of honor and respect, some feeling can develop from that, by their grace. We are inviting grace by simply trying to move respectfully. And so we hear from them, right, that this day is Rathayatra day, very joyful occasion of bringing the Lord back to Vrindavan. It's a very, very happy moment. And we can also remember another very important point. This is the day that Srila Sridhar Maharaj chose to establish his mission of Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Math. He chose this day. You could say it's the best day to begin anything. It is the best beginning. Bringing Krishna back to Vrindavan, it is the most happy day. So yes, it was this day that Srila Sridhar Maharaj chose to establish his mat. It was Ratha-yātrā day 1942. And he had acquired this place a few months beforehand, I believe at the end of 1941. And then it was like officially on this day that he raised the flagpole and, declared this as his mission, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Math. And he had this expensive bamboo pole, which perhaps doesn't mean too much to us, right now in the Western world, but that meant something then, expensive, long, high quality
60
bamboo
feet tall.
pole. And, and even we hear one of his godbrothers, he joked about it, what is Sridhar Maharaj thinking, like has this expensive big bamboo pole. And he has this little hut, right, on the banks of the Ganges. And
was there anything in the plan?
not that I'm aware of. I haven't heard. But he did write a shloka also. He hoisted a big bamboo pole, the flag, and he also wrote a very big shloka, which you could say in a sense was foretelling the future renown of the mission. Srimat Chaitanya Saraswata Matavada Udgita Kirtir Jayashrim, saying this mat is the best of all mats. And he's not speaking out of arrogance, he's simply speaking statement of fact. It is the best of all mats because he's representing the message of his Guru Maharaj and the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Rupanuga line. So he's saying boldly, it is the best of all mats, and he also, the Jaya Shri refers to this flag, shining high, Udgita Kirtir Jayashram, declaring the glory, the glory of this mat is being announced and spread. Udgita Kirtir Jayashram, Bibrat Sambati Ganga Tata, Bibrat Sambati Ganga Tata, Nikata Kolaji Raje. This is the second line, saying that this mat is on the banks of the Ganges, and it is in Koladweep, right? Which is very significant. Everything that Srila Sridhar Maharaj did had so much purpose and intention behind it. So what is Koladweep? Koladweep is considered non-different from Govardhan, right? Because Navadvip, Vrindavan, they are two expressions of the same thing, right? And so every part of Navadvip has its corresponding part in Vrindavan. And so that part of Navadvip is these 9 islands, right? And that island, known as Koladweep, it is identified as Gupta Govardhan, hidden Govardhan, which is very significant because our gurus have identified Govardhan as the place of our aspiration, the place that we aspire to reside, right, and serve, right? In Rupa Goswami's Upadeshamrita, he's identifying Radha Kund as the highest place. And then, just before that, Govardhan, right? And so the vision of our gurus, right? This was expressed by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Sridhar Maharaj and our Gurudev, and no doubt others, that Radha Kund, that is too high for us. So we will stay one step below in Govardhan, right? We will stay in the safety of Govardhan. Govardhan is also very significant because the mood of Krishna in Govardhan is extremely magnanimous, generous, merciful. The worship of Giriraj, it's very generous, not so many rules, regulations associated with it. So Govardhan represents this very sweet, loving, and generous mood of the Lord. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj also brought with him a few Govardhan Shilas, right? Because before he came to stay in Navadvip, he had spent the month of Kartik in Govardhan, Vrindavan area. And so and at that time we hear he also was in this mood of contemplation and considering, where shall I stay, right? Because his Guru Maharaj's mission, the Gaudiya Math, was fracturing at that time. And he stayed for a few years, right? Saraswati Thakur left the world 1st of January 1937, according to Western calculation. And so, for a few years, he tried to remain within the mission, but ultimately it came to a point where he realized it was not possible. And so he went, so this was in Kartik of 1941, he went to stay in Mathura Mandal area and in this mood of prayer. And it was at that time that he started composing Prapana Jivanamrita, right? He was feeling, as he describes, that he was feeling this mood of helplessness. What do I do? I've lost my Guru Maharaj's mission and my service there. And he was feeling this helplessness within him. And so he expressed that he came to this conclusion, like, oh, I'm in this feeling of helplessness, Sharanagati can come to my relief, right? Surrender can come to my relief. And so he was inspired to compile this extraordinary text, right, of Shishi Prapana Jivanamrita. And then he was also meditating on where would be the place of his residence. And he was considering one place in Vrindavan, Udavakyari, it is called. And he was also considering near the Gambhira in Puri. And finally, he decided on Navadvip because he thought, in his humility, he felt Navadvip is the place for the fallen souls. It is the most generous place, and that is most suitable for me. That was his humble feeling. And so then not only did he choose Navadvip, which is known as the most generous place, the place of Mahaprabhu, but within Navadvip, he specifically chose this one area known as Aparad Bhanjan Pat, the place where all offenses are excused, right? So within the land of mercy, it is the most merciful place. And then on top of that, it is Gupta Govardhan, right? Hidden Govardhan. And so, everything just came together perfectly in that place, And so he brought these, it was 2 or 3 Govardhan Shilas he brought with him, and he began worshiping them there. First, he had a place, a small little hut he rented for a few rupees. It was like 3 or 4 or 5 rupees a month, or maybe it was 10 rupees a month. One of his relatives helped at that time. And there's one place I heard a description where Srila Sridhar Maharaj was describing how he lived at that time. And in the day, he would study the scripture. And at night, when there was no light, he would chant. He would chant for so many hours into the night. And he would cook 1 meal a day, would bathe in the Ganges, worship his Govardhan Shilas, and like that. And he was actually in hiding. He was somewhat in hiding. Because many of his godbrothers, they wanted to make him the head of a new organization. But in that time in his life, he did not want that. He just wanted to quietly, study the teachings, Shastra and his gurus. And oh, very nice. Here we are. Yeah, this is the original hut.
Where is that hut?
Yes.
Well, it's no longer existing. It would have fallen apart, I'd say. It's fallen apart by now, but it's on the grounds of where our mott is now. So
Oh, okay.
I would think in the same area as where his current Bhajan Kutir is. Yeah. It's in the back of All Attractive Divinity. This big. This is a restored image. So yeah, I started alone, and then few of his godbrothers found him, and they came to stay there also. So yes, he was more or less in hiding. He just wanted to quietly live his life of bhajan. He'd already lived, full lifetime of preaching and traveling throughout India. Eventually, they found him, and they made this proposal to him. They wanted to make him the head of a new organization, but he declined. What he did was he empowered many of them to become acharyas themselves. And so he gave sannyasa initiation to many of his godbrothers, and empowered them, to become leaders of new branches of the Gaudiya Math, we can say. So, and he continued. We also hear, right, that he got that special permission from Nityananda Prabhu, right, that he went to ask before he settled in Navadvip. He asked for permission from Nityananda. He is Dhameshwar, master of the Dham, and received his blessings, and also had that instruction from Nityananda in his heart, that, you must share your mercy. You cannot, you're asking me for mercy, but you have so much mercy you've received. Now you have to share that with others. And so for that reason, he decided to accept a few disciples, that, okay, he wasn't going to go out actively preaching, but if somebody came to him asking for shelter, he would accept them. Here's Nityan. Is that Nityananda Prabhu? Or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Shri Nityananda Prabhu. So he's dressed like Mahaprabhu, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he began like that in Sri Chaitanya Saraswati. So Bibrat Sambati Ganga Tata Nikata Kola Jiraje Yatra Shigor Saraswata Mata Nirata Gorgata Grananti is the third line of that shloka. Saying that, the resident, describing the residents of this mat, that they are dedicated to the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the line of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur specifically, and Gorgata Grananti, and they're always singing the glories of Mahaprabhu and telling the glories and the message of Mahaprabhu. And then Nityam Rupanuga Kritamati Guru Garanga Radhaji Tasha, and aspiring for the service of Shri Shri Radha Govinda in the line of Shri Rupa. Rupa and Raghunath also can say. Aspiring for the service of Mahaprabhu and Shri Shri Radha Krishna in the line of Guru Gauranga Radha Krishna in the line of Shri Rupa. So this is the verse that Srila Sridhar Maharaj also wrote at that time when he hoisted that flag and announced, this mission. And then our Gurudev Srila Govinda Maharaj, he came a few years later, it was 1947. So 1942, Srila Sridhar Maharaj started, then like 5 years later, our Gurudev came. And our Gurudev, he became the divine architect, who revealed the glory of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's vision of Sri Chaitanya Saraswati. Here we are. We have here the shloka. Thank you very much. And the photo of our mat. And so it was through our Gurudev's divine service that the glory of this mat was manifest. And, in the sense of the physical aspect of the mat, expanding the glory of the mat, taking on a physical form, but also in the message of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's Harikatha, also spreading, our Gurudev, he also was due to his mercy that we could have that. Oh. And we have here, this is like an expanded translation. It's a Bengali translation. Because actually, this verse, it's very, very condensed. A few weeks ago, I went through it with Lalita Madhava Prabhu, and it's almost impossible to give a literal translation of the verse, because there's just so many layers of meaning. It's like very tight and condensed, and so for that reason, you you almost need to have like this expanded translation. And so this is an expanded Bengali translation that our Gurudev made of this Sanskrit verse, and this is an English translation of that. We can maybe just read this and then we can close for today. In the holy abode of transcendental touchstone Shri Navadvip Dham, the self-same Shri Vrindavan, in the land of Koladweep, whose inner identity is the king of mountains, Shri Govardhan, near the charming shores of the holy river Bhagirathi. That's a name for the Ganges, who delivers all the fallen souls, stands that grand and glorious king of all temples, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Ma. In that beautiful retreat, the surrendered devotees whose lives are the message of Shri Gaura are eternally absorbed in the loving service of the Divine Master, the Golden Lord Gauranga, and the loving Lord Shri Govinda Sundar, with his consort Srimati Gandharva, accompanied by all their beloved associates. With hearts always filled with good hope to attain the grace of the Lord, following faithfully in the line of Shri Rupa and Raghunath, the storekeepers of the unlimited treasure of pure, sweet love divine, those surrendered souls ever sing the unending glories of the transcendental name and qualities of the most magnanimous, original Supreme Lord, Shri Shri Gauranga Sundar. Indeed, the hearts of all beings, moving and still, marvel in the glory of Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat as they take shelter in the soothing, affectionate shade of the victory flag. Right? I forgot to mention that Jai Shri means victory flag. That flies aloft and sings wholeheartedly to the world the ever-expanding renown of Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat. Bearing that banner of all transcendental benedictions, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat ever shines resplendent in all its divine magnificence. Jai. Jai Shri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat ki Jai. Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Shri Rathayatra ki Jai. All the assembled devotees ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Jai Gaur Premanande. Okay, now we have live stream. Ratha-yātrā. But YouTube might blacklist our video because of copyright issues, right? No. Wow. There's no sound, huh? Yeah.
Is it night or early morning in Puri?
It'll be night there by now, right? Yeah, because
so
it's
that's-
later.
आज देखम तो भक्त भगवान कर पूर्व मिलन ये भक्त
Bengali.
किए जो भक्त
Sounds like a child.
मागिला नवधा भक्तिर स्वरूप रे मोर
Yeah,
किछि
it's almost
दरकार नाही
midnight.
मोर धन लोड़ा नाही
11:35.
प्रभु जन लोड़ा नाही लोड़ा कोण चाहे.
So this is how women are regrowing their
Okay. Okay, well, we got a nice little clip there. Thank you.
Hi.
Dandavat pranams to everyone and look forward to seeing you next time. Happy Rathayatra. Viva.
Dandavat, Shri Shakari, Dandavat.
Dandavat. Dandavat.
Thank you so much.